I'm sure, I'm sure I had other opportunities and other kinds of confidence and support that I wouldn't have had, you know, if I had been a Ladakhi nun or something like that. I did know some Ladakhi nuns who were around in Tashijung, and my teacher, Abu Rinpoche, had a monastery in Ladakh, and there were nuns at his place, but the nun, actually the main nun there, was really like a servant. She was, you know, hauling the water and helping to cook and so on at Abu Rinpoche's monastery in Manali. So that's where it's okay. That's where I went eventually, was to Abu Rinpoche, and he was a married Lama, and he had 3 children. But I did have a very strong feeling that I didn't want to be controlled by anybody. I didn't want, you know, sort of a mother superior type telling me what to do or where to go. And so the way I lived being a nun, which is a perfectly acceptable thing for nuns to do, was to travel and to do pilgrimage and then do retreat. Although I think for a Tibetan or Ladakhi nun, it would be difficult for them to have the support necessary to do that. But Tenzin Palmo and some of the other nuns did the traditional thing of begging every year and getting food and then going into retreat. You could live on $500 a year. So that's what I did. I didn't feel any particular prejudice in terms of the teachings that I received from Abu Rinpoche as a woman. I do remember the kind of shock when we went to these empowerments that Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche was giving in Tashijung. This was toward the end of when I was a nun, and there was a big series of initiations that went on for 3 months. And when I went in, the other nuns, these other Western nuns that I knew, said, "We have to sit at the back." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, we're nuns." And I said, "So?" And she said, "Well, you know, a nun, no matter how long she's been ordained or how knowledgeable she is or how much she's practiced, traditionally always has to sit behind all of the monks, even a monk who's been ordained for 1 day, and that's just how it is." So we were way, way in the back, sort of squished behind the youngest monks, between the monks, the youngest monks and the lay people. And so that was actually the first time where I thought, maybe there's a problem here. Maybe this isn't, you know, quite equal for men and women. But I hadn't actually experienced it as an issue up until then, and I always felt my teachers were ready to give me any teaching that I was ready to receive. And so I was doing the preliminary practices and other kinds of things, and being moved along in the way that I would have been if I had been a male disciple. But I think it had to do probably a lot with my own confidence in myself, not even thinking there would be a problem, and being foreign. It's interesting, one of the things that that I think has happened is that there's been an influence from the West toward the Tibetans in terms of women's issues and nuns. And this question constantly coming up for the Dalai Lama and everybody else. Well, what about the women? Where are the women? Why aren't the nuns getting this or that? And so after a while, I think they thought, well, why aren't they? And so they have, to a large extent, tried to address that. I remember being with one of my Tibetan teachers in the car, and I was driving. This Lama from Tibet was sitting next to me. His sister, who's a nun, was sitting behind with Anne Klein, who's also a Buddhist scholar who's interested in feminism. And so I don't remember exactly how it came up, but we were discussing the issues of nuns and their lack of support and how it was very hard for them, and the lack of them being treated equally and getting equal teachings. And so I was really arguing with the Lama about this, and he was listening, and of course no one in Tibet would think of arguing with him about anything. But being Western, I didn't have that kind of conditioning, and so I was, and presenting a lot of arguments about the nature of mind, and if it is actually beyond gender, then why is there this prejudice, and so on. And eventually I heard that he went back to Tibet and changed a lot of things, and the nuns are now completely equal to the nuns. The nuns are, the nuns and the monks are equal, and they are getting the same education, and they are also, in terms of the pujas and so on, they're taking all the different roles. And I heard from Anne Klein that while I was having this argument in the front seat, that his sister was pinching her really hard in the back seat, like, yeah, keep it going.
What was his reaction as you were talking with him?
He was okay. I mean, I think he actually likes that when people argue with him, because it doesn't happen very often, and it gets him thinking about things. He wasn't angry or upset or anything. And I think he already was treating his nuns quite equally. He has that tendency, and now he's criticized in Tibet because of this, that he's, you know, indulging the nuns, and it isn't traditional how he's treating them. And he's also started schools for girls in his area of Kham, which there were none of before. Only the young boys were getting educated. So it's hard to know how much influence was from the West, but I think there was definitely some. They lack self-esteem because they are told that they're inferior from day one. It's, you know, girl is born, it's a disappointment to the family. The word for woman, keme, is lower rebirth. It's not considered fortunate to have a girl. I remember when I was pregnant, after I had disrobed, I was told that if I had a boy, it would mean that it was okay that I had disrobed, but if I had a girl, it would mean it wasn't. And so I had a girl. And I did feel really disappointed and kind of upset, because at that point I hadn't had my consciousness raised to the point of thinking, you know, otherwise, that you know. So I actually felt this sort of feeling of failure, and that I should have had a boy, and that this showed that I shouldn't have disrobed.